Hello and welcome to a very jolly episode of A Fistful of Movies this week, or should I say this fucking year, because it's been a long time since this YouTube show has been on, and I'm joined by the man who might have very well killed the show based on an episode we did, I think it was last year, which we're going to try again now, and it's an Arnie special where we look at the best. Most underrated Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, the top three each. Denis, welcome back on the show again. It took a lot of wrangling. It took a lot of, calming me down to get you back on again. But we've sorted the audio issues and got your own show now as well, don't you? On the back of these technical issues.
Yeah, cheers, Andy. It's been a while. It must be coming up to the first anniversary of the last one. But like you said, between sound problems and scheduling conflicts, we got there in the end. And yeah, I've got basically... I started a podcast off from my own blog, which is a bit of everything. It's called Alternate Thoughts, movies, sport, what have you. But yeah, bits and pieces when I get the interviews. So good to get going again on one of our favorite topics, the Arnold.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I was thinking about this actually early on today. Like, he's not the best actor, and he's not, I often think how much of our love of Arnold is nostalgia, and how much of it is, that he's a genuine kind of movie star. You can't have him in a movie star level the same as someone like Tom Cruise, but at the same time, he's undeniably a presence on screen and a movie star. What is it about Arnie that kind of captivated you? I guess you came across him as a kid like me, watching over 18 movies as a fucking 10-year-old,
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, the nostalgia factor is a big thing. I suppose the presence, just his sheer size, when they say that someone takes up space on a movie, well, he really just takes up space on a movie. You can tell he's an ex-bodybuilder and all that. But he does have the charisma too, and a kind of a strange kind of, I would say, kind of clumsiness and a bit of comedic vibe that he brings to the table, which maybe you don't get from other action stars, and not as obvious comedy. Even in the more serious Arnie movies, there's still kind of space for the one-liners and a bit of, funny banter. That became kind of his calling card after a while. But definitely, like you said, the nostalgia is a big part, seeing stuff as a kid. And the fact that he did a mix of, action movies for adults, kind of kids stuff as well. He definitely liked to play around a bit with different genres, which is good.
Yeah, and if you compare him to somebody like... maybe Sylvester Stallone or Jean-Claude Van Damme or Dolph Lundgren. Maybe it's a bit unfair for Sylvester Stallone because he's proved it in other ways he can actually act. But kind of the other people I've mentioned, and even someone like Bruce Willis to a lesser extent, it's kind of like Arnie without the natural gravitas. He pulls you into a scene no matter what he's doing. And lots of times, like you mentioned, it's kind of like, it can be comedic, it can be tongue-in-cheek, it can be him trying to speak English in his earlier movies. But yeah, and then there's movies where he's, obviously, we're not going to be talking about the greatest hits of movies, because we're talking about the underrated movies. But look at Terminator, for instance. Like, there's nobody, almost his kind of stiffness and his kind of lack of acting chops kind of lends himself to a robot kind of figure, and his physical presence and the specimen that he is kind of juxtaposed with that. I can't imagine anyone, making Terminator the way he did, just because of the combination of who he is as a person, I guess.
Yeah, like you said, it was O.J. Simpson, I think, was in line for that role now, which is like another universal way. Again, like you said, the scale, the size, no one else would kind of be so convincing as a cyborg. He had that kind of thick Austrian accent, which he delivered like a machine gun at times, and only 10 lines or something in the first one. I'm not sure if it's exactly 10, but it's not much more anyway. It's all straight one syllable at a time and get out, things like that. So yeah. I mean, and he went on from there, obviously, to have much more than 10 lines in a sequel and so forth. And the franchises that he kicked off, I mean, obviously the Terminator is his biggest one by far, but even Predator, I mean, you take Arnie out of the Predator sequels and look what happens. You have kind of mediocre action movies. So he's definitely a presence that's missed if you dare to kind of chop and change with the formula. So that's testament to him and what he brings to the table, I think.
Yeah, and just before we do get into our underrated movies, listen, before you fucking drop it in that you've been reading his book, you know, I'm pretty sure that's why you fucked up the audio on the show last time, so you could have a whole novel read in between it. But you've been reading his autobiography, haven't you, the last while? Is there anything that, you know, you didn't know about him before that like you found interesting, or is it a good read anyway, actually?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, because like we mentioned about Arnie, the actor, obviously, but you got the different sides to him before. I mean, we know about the weightlifting stuff too from Pumping Iron, the documentary he made. But even before that, when he grew up in kind of rural Austria, we'll say, he was in the army, the cadets, for 2 years. So I didn't know that. And like we were talking about his kind of clumsiness, despite being really big and physically imposing. There's just something about Arnie every now and again. He kind of does something that's wacky, and he drove a tank down a hill because he left the handbrake on.
Yeah.
And just things like that at the beginning. And then later on, when he made friends with George Bush Sr., they were on a toboggan together, and he crashed into his wife and broke her leg, I think. So little things like that, you know.
I'm trying to think. I wonder what the pun or the one-liner he would have done if he crashed into her. What did he do? He crashed into her foot.
Yeah, they were tobogganing down a hill somewhere, you know. Obviously, after acting again, Arnie got into politics, so he rubbed shoulders with everyone from Ronald Reagan, the Bushes, kind of a moderate Republican, I guess you could call him. But he was on holiday somewhere with George Bush Sr. helping him down the hill on a toboggan, and his tobogganing skills seem to be just as good as his tank driving ones. So he managed to crash into Barbara and break her leg, which is impressive.
That's brilliant. He could have been like, that's not the type of Bush I wanted. But
something like that.
We can only imagine. But let's get on to the main section of our show now with the top 3 underrated movies. I mean, we've probably seen every Arnie movie under the book, really, between us. I'd have to say, if we went through the list, there wouldn't be many omissions from the list. But there's obviously some that people, maybe lesser Arnie movies, if you will, that aren't the likes of Terminator or Predator or things like that. What would be your first one on the list of underrated movies?
So one that I like, which was a return to kind of serious action movies after going into, like we said, the kids' world for a while of like he did Batman and Robin and Jingle All the Way, and he was very much going for the summer blockbuster or winter blockbuster kids thing. So the movie is End of Days, and it's really a millennium action movie. You know, it was set in 1999, just before the new year, and it's about Satan coming back to Earth. So it's a good, kind of cheesy but fun premise, you know, for an adult action movie, and it's good to see Arnie back in that mode. And there was a lot of hype about it at the time, but the reason I put it on a list like this is because in the years since, it's kind of been, I wouldn't say forgotten about, but definitely glossed over a bit in terms of Arnie's career. And it was just good to see him doing what he does best again after a bit of a hiatus, I guess, from proper action movie roles. And it was pretty well directed, good supporting characters, good supporting cast. Gabriel Byrne, Kevin Pollak. So yeah, I just thought it worked really well. The effects for its time were good. I mean, I'd have to watch it again now and see how it holds up in terms of I guess it was industrial light and magic they were using. But yeah, plenty of stunt work for Arnie as well. And he was kind of getting on a bit in his age as well. So he didn't try and be, you know, Conan the Barbarian or anything where he's unstoppable. Yeah. He had kind of moments of fragility and where he might not make it and save the bride to be from Satan, things like that. So yeah, I just thought it flowed really well. It's a good kind of solid action movie in itself.
Yeah, that's actually one on my list as well. So I might as well bring it into it now as well. But we mentioned this before. This is quite. When it comes to certain head-to-heads, you know, this is where you can have the best use of Arnie, you know, like for instance, Predator is Arnie versus, you know, an intergalactic kind of alien that goes around hunting big game, essentially. So you're going to need, if you're going to pick a human, you're going to need a certain presence on screen to kind of make it seem like an even match, even though it's insurmountable, you know. And in this, it's like in Predator, it's Arnie versus the alien. You're thinking, if you're going to pick a human, it needs to kind of look like him. You kind of have to believe that he's able to best him. You know, you don't want I don't know. There's not many action heroes around nowadays that could fill that kind of void. You know, they don't have the presence. Even someone like a Matt Damon who's kind of transitioned into action, you just wouldn't believe it in the same way that he'd be able to, you know, kind of rawly beat a presence like that. So in End of Days, we have Arnie versus the Devil, essentially, isn't it? Played by Gabriel Byrne. And, you know, if you do a matchup on paper between a human being and the devil, you're thinking, you know, there's no way in hell, quite literally, that, you know, humans are going to stand a chance. But it's kind of like Arnie transcends that, you know, so it's Arnie versus the devil, because this is when his persona off screen and on screen kind of merge together. So you're not thinking of it as a human being versus the devil. You're thinking of like Arnie's going to kick ass. Arnie can probably fucking best the devil. Arnie's going to be able to, like, you know, go toe to toe. And I think in movies like that, that's when you cast Arnold Schwarzenegger. And in that movie, if anybody else alongside the devil in that movie, it's going to be a lesser movie. And as I recall, Arnie acts pretty well in that movie, and he has improved as an actor. Actually, it has to be said. I saw this movie a few years ago called Maggie, where he actually doesn't do any action scenes, and it's kind of a really kind of mopey kind of zombie movie. It's not a great movie actually, but Arnie is actually very good in it. So he had learned by the time of End of Days to kind of, you know, have his dialogue match his emotion and kind of really cultivate his look. So when he's trying to save the world in this movie, he's able to pull it off a little bit better acting wise as well. And I think it's one of those movies where I think it was kind of captured the zeitgeist at the time, because it was like Y2K, the end of the world, 1999. And it was kind of on the pulse at the time of what people's, like, I wouldn't say concerns, but, you know, people were concerned. I remember fucking counting down to New Year's Eve and thinking something might happen. But then I didn't realize it was going to be an end of the world every 2 years anyway. But that would have been our first kind of end of the world kind of scenario that I don't know, I took it a little bit more seriously than I did anyone since. But it was just a kind of movie now it's very much forgotten, because nobody even knows what Y2K is or 1999 end of the world. It's kind of probably 2030 now, global warming. So it's very much been forgotten, but it's well worth a look from memory. I will say, with the caveat that I haven't seen it in quite a while, so maybe this is not as great as we remember, but I remember enjoying it at the time. And at that time, you know, it was 1999. Terminator was only a few years prior. Predator was about 10 years prior. It was still linked to Arnie's best movies, you know, which was really from the 90s or 80s, really. So it wasn't a letdown like some of these movies that came later, you know.
Yeah, exactly. It was pretty big budget for the time as well, as I remember, you know, and just like you said, the fact that it was set around 2000 Y2K, they did a lot of promotion for it, and it had quite a big well kind of produced soundtrack, you know, just all the big bands at the time and artists like Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine, I think Eminem, they were all on it to give it that really like millennial 99 2000 feel. So all of that came to, you know, a lot of the feeling that I liked about it. And while it wasn't a massive box office success or anything, I think most Arnie fans would have been pretty pleased with it. Like you said, bringing back the you know, the feel of the late 80s, early 90s, this heyday basically of those serious 18 rated kind of action movies.
Yeah, off the top of my head, maybe it is the last Arnie heyday movie that wasn't part of a franchise or a sequel, really. Other than maybe that, I enjoyed that one where he was a clone. The I can't remember what it was called. It's not on my list anyway. But it was, what was it? The Sixth Man or something.
The Sixth Day, yeah. That came. That was around the same time, actually, a couple of years after. I think. Yeah,
that was decent. But what's next on your list then?
So the next one is Red Heat from 1988, I think, directed by Walter Hill. So I've always been a fan of Walter Hill. You know, he does a good kind of later day Western, I guess we'll say. He directed 48 Hours and The Warriors, things like that. Extreme Prejudice, which is a good underrated Western as well. So it's him, Arnie, playing a Russian cop coming to America to solve a crime. So it's a real buddy cop movie, and his buddy is James Belushi, who's kind of tasked with keeping Arnie under control before he goes and does his Russian-style police work in the US, you know. It's very much similar to the part of
how's his Russian accent? Did you say Russian cop?
Yeah, he's playing Russian, yeah. So I mean, basically he's just talking his normal Austrian accent, slowing everything down and going, I did. Liar. So if you will, it's kind of a mix of 48 Hours, Rush Hour with I mean, he made 48 Hours too. So a very violent kind of buddy comedy. All the ingredients, you expect from those 80s style action comedies. Like it is 18, so
Yeah.
it's very violent. Walter Hill's a good director in terms of like shootouts. So you get plenty of kind of bang for the buck. A lot of good kind of recognizable supporting actors that I couldn't necessarily name off, but you'll see these guys in every second movie in the 80s, action wise. And just like putting it all together, I think is a good formula. And Arnie and James Belushi go off well off each other. They're kind of both the straight man and the wild card, if you will, because like Belushi's constantly bickering, going, "You can't drive down this one-way street," and he's like, "Watch me," that kind of way. It's nothing particularly like wildly imaginative. Like I said, you could list off the movies that are similar that came before, but it's just, I guess, those kind of movies live or die on the partnership, and the partnership happens to be really good. And James Belushi, it's one of his better kind of buddy movie, action movie performances, I guess, because he's done a lot of them as well. And the villain is good. I just remember everything kind of clicking. And Arnie himself, I think he regards it as a movie that maybe could have or should have done better. It's just that he made so many movies at the time. He was literally practically churning them out. I mean, it came after Predator, before Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop. So he had so many movies that that stuff was bound to kind of run in together. And I think the best way to watch it is kind of years later and give it another appraisal,
Yeah, so that was around the level of, so if you said it was after Predator was what, 1989, and then Kindergarten Cop was what, 1991 or something?
Yeah,
so
I think Predator might have even been a bit earlier. It was definitely after the Terminator. So if Total Recall and Kindergarten Cop, I think they were the same year actually, 1990. So this would have been before both of them, but after Predator. So around that time, like I said, he said it himself. He was bringing out maybe 2 movies a year and just kept on with the next one, and it was conveyor belt stuff. I mean, you can see why he took a break after, but at that time, for making so many movies, the quality was pretty good. And that's why you can come to these ones and just say, it's worth kind of looking at again.
Yeah, well, funnily enough, actually, that's one movie I haven't seen, actually. It's one of those ones that, like you said, it got lost in the shuffle for many people at the time, because he was just banging out a lot of movies at that time. So it's kind of inevitable that the hype of some of those movies mentioned would actually get that one lost in the shuffle. But it did make me think of another underrated aspect of Arnie when you talked about Belushi, is that Arnie does very well when paired with a buddy, really. Even a lot of his comedy work, he's very good at kind of like riffing off like different people, like Danny DeVito in Twins. It's going to be a new Twins as well, so God knows what that's going to be like. I don't know if that's still in the
triplets. I think, I've heard Eddie Murphy, but I don't know if that's even still in production.
I mean, God, but even in the more straight-laced movies, like he pairs off people well, like Dutch in Predator, when he's like, "Dutch, you son of a bitch." But an underrated aspect of that movie actually is their kind of friendship, and their kind of, it's not like we get much of their backstory, but they kind of they kind of complement each other so well, considering they're both kind of the same type of masculine, even that. So he can play off opposites like Danny DeVito, or people that are just similar versions of him, like Carl Weathers. And I'm just trying to think of it.
Or even more better actors, like no offense to Arnie, but better actors will say like Bill Paxton, sharing scenes with him in True Lies, for example, and kind of doing well.
But Bill Paxton. And who is his partner in True Lies again? Tom something or other.
Tom Arnold?
Yeah, he does a good job of playing off him as well. Or even my namesake in Terminator 2, Edward Furlong.
Edward Furlong,
the last hope I had in Hollywood. Well, we'll see what happened to him now. But
the last Furlong.
Yeah, even playing off like kids, like Edward Furlong or Kindergarten Cop. Arnie is quite good when paired with different scenarios and different people. He can really like play off them, really. And considering that he's often a one-note persona, one way or the other, it feels like he has more range when paired with different people, even though it's kind of the same Arnie, or even like Jingle All the Way with the late Phil Hartman. he's actually quite good at complimenting, like you said, better actors that he's paired with. So the Belushi Arnold kind of buddy cop pairing would be something I would definitely be interested in taking a look at, to be honest.
Yeah, again, I mean, I watched it kind of years ago, and as part of, sometimes you go through a stage of watching. I'd say I watched a few '80s Arnie movies together over a couple of weekends, and it was in between like The Predator, Total Recall, some of the usual ones. And I just said, you know what, I'm due to watch this. It had all the ingredients, and yeah, I wasn't disappointed. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah. So my next pick, let me look at my list here. You can tell the organization skills are strong with this one, but mine is actually a movie that when I saw at the time, I really enjoyed it. And the more I think about it, it was almost ahead of its time from what came later. And it was I think it panned at the time. And that's The Last Action Hero. It was meta before people were ready for meta, really. The only other thing I can think of, and I'm sure there was some smart ass YouTuber will fucking come in with something, but the only one I can think of that was kind of meta in a sense was This Is Spinal Tap, and the way that it's taking the piss out of, rock bands and things like that, and it's like deconstructing documentary music dramas as well. In The Last Action Hero, it's deconstructing action movies and Hollywood, and from what I remember, Arnie gets the kind of this kid gets the golden ticket where he can just transport into the cinema, and he's in a what's the name? I can't remember the name of the action character that Arnie plays. I can't remember what it is.
Is it Slater? Is it?
Yeah, Jack Slater or something. No, maybe that's the movie. Or is that the guy from EastEnders? I don't even know. But
we're Saved by the Bell.
Yeah. But so he gets transported into the cinema through the movies, which seeing that as a kid alone is a brilliant concept from my childhood imagination. But actually I watched it again a few years later and it actually stands up. So it kind of like deconstructs the action movies and takes the piss out of the genre itself. And like it has, even Arnie's taking the piss. Arnie appears as himself as the real actor, and he even gets to meet him. It's kind of hard to explain, but he even gets to meet his fictional character who transports beyond the cinema screen, and then like Arnie's playing this character, and then Jack Slater, who like is the fictional Arnie, shall we say, is like, you ruined my life and everything like that. And then the kid is in the world, and he's saying, no, you're just an actor, and then he shows him Terminator, and then Sylvester Stallone is playing the Terminator. So there's loads of kind of fun being poked at the genre, and there's this cartoon character, a sidekick as well, and there's just a lot going on in the movie that wasn't appreciated at the time. I don't think people knew what to expect, but considering we've had a barrage of that type of kind of meta commentary the last few years, and with action movies also, I think it's very much worth a look at. I enjoyed it at the time. I enjoyed it when I rewatched it as well, but maybe the problem was the age group that it was aged at. It was like kind of partly childhood fantasy and part like deconstruction of like Hollywood, but I don't know if it feels like people were not ready for it at the time. And I don't know, it'd be interesting if we went back and did a reappraisal of it for maybe a future episode of Scene, because it's been maybe 15 years since I've seen it a second time, and I was an adult, but you don't know how much that's tied into nostalgia of seeing it the first time. But I know it's a movie that you never hear people talk about now, but I very much enjoyed it. I don't know your feelings on it.
Yeah, I remember liking it at the time, but like you said, that doesn't kind of mean as much now. And it was definitely, it would have been even in the 90s that I saw it. So my memories of it are kind of, I think the problem was as well, when you're watching it as a kid, again, like, 10, 12 years old, you have access to like Terminator 2, True Lies. So watching it between Terminator 2 and True Lies, it kind of fell between two stools, because it's not as action-packed as Terminator 2, and it's probably not as funny as True Lies, at least not as consistently, funny. The kind of True Lies does a great job of being an espionage send-up. So what I think the best way people describe Last Action Hero is kind of a brave failure, because it, like you said, it completely tanked at the box office. And Arnie, being as, hard and unsentimental as he is, he describes it as like a kind of a misbirth of a child or something like that. It's a kind of translation.
Yeah.
Because again, Arnie judges success and failure by how well things do at the box office ultimately. So he doesn't like talking about it as much. You can tell in, like I told you about the Total Recall memoirs, the movies that he spends time on, like the Terminator, Conan, the big franchises, like pages and pages. And the ones that he didn't like, and obviously the big flops like Red Sonja go into this category as well. But he'll just kind of go, oh yeah, I did a movie, it didn't do so well. Last Action Hero, he said it just didn't find the right audience, and it was a case of, like you said, marketing, the time, the way it was kind of presented and what people expected, and it just didn't find the right people to go see it. And he said, and people kind of treated him in Hollywood like someone had died in his family after it came out, because, you know, after Terminator 2 and Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop all smashing the box office to bits, then this just kind of, you know, sizzled out a bit.
What's your final most underrated Arnie movie?
So it's another one from the same kind of time period. It's 1986, I think it came out just after Commando. And like I mentioned, it's one that Arnie doesn't really like. He said it as if he just had to do it. It's called Raw Deal. So I watched it with no expectations whatsoever. And it's kind of a bit of a mix of an FBI undercover, mafioso kind of movie. So it's not the kind of territory that you always see Arnie in. You know, I mean, action movies, sure. But the fact that he's got a badge and he's got kind of some, you know, some standing to do what he does, which is basically, it's like a movie where he goes after the mob, but not necessarily shootout after shootout. There is some kind of plot, you know, there are scenes where he meets characters and has to determine who he needs to get to next, as opposed to just bursting down doors and gunning everyone down. So there was more kind of dialogue and more plot situations that I expected when I started watching this. And it was a movie that I actually had to sit down and watch rather than just have on in the background. Like, even Commando, you could just put on the background, especially if you've seen it a few times, because it's just all action. But Raw Deal had kind of gaps where people were actually, you know, speaking a bit at least. And honestly, I don't remember the intricacies of the plot, because it's just standard, you know, police. Is he undercover? Is he trying to work with us? Getting against the mafia? I can't remember what they actually did to him, but he had a reason to have some kind of vendetta. And, you know, again, some good kind of older style Hollywood actors who probably all passed away long ago. One of the gangsters was Robert Davi, who you see in Die Hard, License to Kill. So it's that kind of dependable, you know, craggy-faced villain. So it gives it some gravitas. And the guy who made it was John Irvin. He went on to make kind of, you know, gangster movies, I think. City of Industry being one, which nobody's seen, with Harvey Keitel. So he makes that type of movie anyway, you know, underground mafia thing. And like I said, Arnie seemed to have no interest in it, so I doubt it got much promotion at the time. It was one of his conveyor belt movies because, again, it probably came in between Commando and Predator, which came out pretty close together. So again, you know, like you said, just he made so many movies around that time. It's another forgotten one completely.
Yeah, you've managed to pull two that I haven't seen, so that's quite a good underrated ones. And I think when you mentioned them last year, I still hadn't seen them, so not much has changed. But it's definitely two that I want to check out because I want to complete the catalog at this stage. Apparently, he's got a new Netflix series coming out that he's going to star in, apparently, but I don't know when that's going to be. But until then, I might check out Raw Deal and the other one you mentioned. But so you mentioned a few times with his book now that he's kind of skirted under, you know, the ones that haven't done well. Did you get the impression from reading his book that he doesn't take criticism too well?
Yeah, there's definitely that side of it. I mean, and it's kind of like the way Donald Trump thinks about his businesses. You know, if something tanks, that's it. Never mentioned again.
Yeah.
Arnie has, despite the fact that they don't get on so well, despite, you know, both went into politics after many other different kinds of careers, both did The Apprentice. They have similarities in terms of if a project fails, there's no sentimentality attached. It's just a case of crash it, burn, move on. So Arnie's happy to talk about like the first two Terminators, Predator, all the ones you expect, you know, True Lies, Commando, whatever. But if you bring up Raw Deal and the likes of, you know, I'm sure he'd kind of be like, I didn't like that. So
yeah. I never met a movie like that before. What are you talking about?
You're a liar.
What movie? But yeah. So I guess from what we're saying is it kind of seems like he deems a successful movie ones that the public has actually liked, rather than like he hasn't talked about any movie fondly in his book in the way we've talked about him. Like it has to have done well on the box office and been talked about. He's not talking about the time he worked on this. Well, he's never worked on a small indie movie, but he's not interested in the ones that didn't make bank and didn't actually get hype, really, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of his character, you know. He just wants to get on to the next thing. And if you look at all the type of careers he had, you can see he's always a go-getter. He's always thinking about the next thing. Because even then, I mean, from End of Days onwards, when he was getting ready to be the governor of California, which nobody expected. He was really losing interest in movies. In fact, he didn't even want to do Terminator 3, but I guess he had it in his contract that he had to do it with whichever, I can't remember what studio made it, but he would have been licensed to like finish that movie before running for governorship. So he actually delayed his candidacy by a year just to finish that. And then obviously he came back and did a string of comeback movies, but I wasn't taking, I don't know how you were with all of those, but none of them really impressed me much. They had their moments, but from like you say, Escape Plan, Sabotage, The Last Stand, like if I never saw any of them again, I wouldn't care. I think that's the impression they left on me.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You know what? I wish he didn't come back to do any of those Terminator movies. Quite honestly, I didn't mind him doing new movies that are forgettable. Although I quite like The Last Stand from memory. But like you said, if I never saw it, it would absolutely be fine. But I don't like the fact that he repeatedly goes back to like lesser Terminator movies, and it just kind of almost is like a parody of the character at this point. What was the one? I don't think it was the last Terminator. I think it was the Terminator before, where he's going on about being, I'm old, not obsolete. Like there's one scene where listen, and I know there's probably a lot of Game of Thrones fans. There's probably a lot of there's not many Jai Courtney fans, but those
Jai Courtney's fan.
Yeah, Sarah Connor and who's Reese Kyle
Reese, yeah.
Yeah, they're played by those two charisma vacuum people like the Khaleesi from Game of Thrones. I can't remember her name now. And
Jai Courtney is John Connor, right?
Oh, right. Is he? No,
he's Kyle Reese. Yeah, sorry, I can barely remember anything.
John Connor is back. John Connor is evil in that movie, and he's played by that really good actor, the guy we like from. Yeah,
Jason Clarke. Yeah, he is good.
Yeah. But there's one scene in that movie where they travel in time 15 years in the future, and then Arnie as the Terminator, he's like, he has to physically live 15 years and arrive. He has 15 years to plan where he's got to be on that bridge, right? For when they come. He knows where they're going to be. And then he shows up late. You're a fucking Terminator, bro. So he turns up late, and then they're like, where were you? T1000, T2000. He's like, oh, I got stuck in traffic. And I was like, no, this isn't what the Terminator is.
Yeah, that even like you said, the sequels are all below par anyway, but that was somehow by far the worst of the Terminator sequels. The fact that they tried to reboot Terminator 1 within the sequel, and it was just so badly done as well, even the direction. So they did that like spin around slow-mo, which didn't happen at all in the first one, because it was a low-budget James Cameron. And like the great thing about the first Terminator is that it fitted into so many categories. It's a sci-fi movie. It's also kind of a horror movie. It's a low-budget, almost practically an independent movie at the time, because it was and nobody knew who James Cameron was. No, people barely knew Arnie as a movie star. Obviously, he was, he had his weightlifting career and stuff, but as a movie star on the poster, people just about knew him from Conan, I guess. But like, the last Terminator or the one before, that was not just the worst Terminator, probably one of the worst movies he's made, full stop, I would say.
Yeah, even that is true about the first Terminator, actually. It's hard now when we didn't see it at the time, but it's even like when you watch stuff like, I know you're not a fan, I'm not particularly a fan, but some of the movies are good. It's like the first Star Wars movies, the original trilogy. Everyone forgets that Yoda is an anticlimactic kind of punchline where you're expecting this big Jedi, and then it turns out to be this old kind of green guy. So, but now it's been kind of retconned in everyone else's mind that like he's a great warrior. But at the time, it was a kind of, it was a bit of a joke. You're expecting something else, and it's hard looking back now at Terminator, at the mammoth franchise it is, and kind of realizing what Terminator 1 was. It is a cyberpunk kind of indie film. Like, who's this Arnie guy? And I remember growing up, I always preferred the second one, but I rewatched the first one there a few years ago, and it's just, I love the second one as well. It's in my top 100, but the first one was just such a tight movie, and it's just a great action movie. And like you said, it can be a horror movie, it can be, an action movie. It's just so many things, and it's just very, it's not rammed up with CGI even. Like Arnie that's another use of Arnie, as we talked about. Like there is no the sci-fi in that is believing that Arnie is a robot, really, until the bad CGI at the end where he's a robot. But he carries that movie on his presence alone. So yeah, it's a shame what Terminator became. But anyway, that tangent aside, my final one, and let me get the description of this now so I can do it justice. It's The Running Man. And The Running Man, let me get the IMDb description for you. So, in a dystopian America, a falsely convicted policeman gets his shot at freedom when he must forcibly participate in a TV game show where convicts, runners, and all these other people must battle killers for their freedom. So, they basically, it kind of feels like a reality TV show run by Fox News in a kind of an extreme version of, you know, Donald Trump, if he was a dictator in the truest sense of the world. Like it's like showbiz is run wild. And this is another one from, I think it's 1980s anyway. And I watched it, and it's actually so ahead of its time from then that it's caught up, and it seems so current now, where, you know, we've had a president that was, you know, basically elected on his personality and his hyperbolic charisma, if you want to call it that. He's fucking pissed off both of us long before that. But it's and then, you know, everything plays out from murders, from scandals. It all plays out in the public eye, and public opinion is based on, you know, how much entertainment you can get from a person before you spit him up and throw him down. And in this version, it's like the Kishi's fucking castle, like on crack. It's so you have this game show where these characters just have to run through this kind of almost like athletic assault course. And meanwhile, there's this, you know, a talk show host kind of narrating what's going on at times, saying why they're there. And there's all these kind of, it's almost like a video game where you have all these bosses that show up, and these kind of, you know, forces that Arnie has to fight. And I remember my friend, he watched it the first time and he was expecting something different, and he told me it wasn't very good. So my expectations were low. And then I rewatched it with him a second time, and he turned to me and said, "I'm really enjoying this now." And that's because it's very, even taking aside the stuff that I've just mentioned, it's just ballooned up, cartoonish, over the top, not taking itself seriously. One thing I will say is the one-liners in that movie are fucking terrible. Like it's like if somebody got hit over a brick over the head and then watched a lot of action movies and it just didn't quite compute. Like they set up the one-liners well, none of them land. It's just very weird, especially for a movie that's so fun and cartoonish. But that's the one thing, the action one-liners don't land at all. But other than that, it's a movie that seems very of the 2020s or the late 2010s, you know. And it's very silly and fun and just, yeah, it's very good. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah, it's been like 10, 15 years, but I do remember enjoying it. Yeah, I like the dystopia setting, like you said. I guess it's like, you know, you said it hadn't really been done before, but there were kind of seeds planted in 70s movies, we'll say, like maybe Rollerball or Death Race 2000, the same kind of thing, right?
Good
The
point,
game show, dystopia. But I think The Running Man was even more kind of subversive than those movies, because with them, it was just one game finish. Like there was a lot of things going on with the TV cameras. And who did you say directed it again? It wasn't a big director, right? Because like
I've got it here. Paul Michael Glaser. I have to say I haven't heard of him, but
yeah,
it's based on a Stephen King novel, actually.
Yeah, The Running Man. Yeah,
again.
It might have been from Stephen Bachman novels or something. But yeah, like it has the style of, you know, Paul Verhoeven, who made like RoboCop and that type of the dystopia, right? So it is impressive, yeah, and it was well made for its time as well, I think. And I think it did pretty well. I think on the Arnie scale, he's happy to talk about that one. You know,
yeah,
he acknowledges its existence at least. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I'd have to watch it again now, like so many other ones, to actually reappraise everything about it. But
all right, now we get to a section of our show which, if you enjoyed our Arnie impressions earlier, you're gonna either love it or hate this part of the show. I can tell people are switching off already. So we're going to be talking about, or quoting, as it'd be more accurate, in an Arnie accent, our favorite Arnie one-liners. I think we've got 4 of them each. So what's number 1 on your list there? Well, I guess it's in no order, but give us one of your favorite Arnie one-liners.
Yeah, this is just for being memorable from the truly terrible Eraser, which is probably the only thing I know remember from Eraser. from 1996. But Arnie shoots, I'm not sure if it's a crocodile or alligator anyway, and he just barks out, "Your luggage."
Yeah.
So it comes out of nowhere. I mean, I don't know what the crocodile and the alligator are even doing in the action movie in the first place. The only reason they came in was for Arnie to say that, I would say. Not integral to the plot, not even. It's just, yeah, it's one of the few kind of later day Arnie one-liners that you remember, just mostly for being kind of terrible, I guess. But yeah.
So to be clear, Arnie says that to the fucking crocodile or alligator, is it?
After he shoots it, yeah. He shoots it. So obviously the alligators are there as part of like the main baddies attempts to take him down. I mean, his I don't know if he's going through a house or something, just taking out henchmen, and along the way someone's decided to throw in one or two alligators or crocs to kill him. And he shoots them and then your luggage.
Do you think Arnie like requested the alligator? He's like, guys, I got a great one-liner. I can say, I can shoot a croc and say that's luggage. And he's like, yeah. Arnie, there's no way. Listen, either the crocodiles show up or I'm out.
Arnie probably wrote that. Yeah, I mean, like I used to joke that it was in his contract about the one-liners, but in the book it seemed it's not far off. It was a big thing. He's like, people know me for the action, sure, but what sets me apart is the one-liners. So like, you know, it's no coincidence that we're going through all these and kind of the memorable things, because it's a big part of it. So he's probably had a few co-writes in history as well as, you know, give me that script.
Screenplay co-written by Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, wow, he co-wrote Terminator. Yeah, that was me, that one line. But yeah, so my first one on the list, and this is just for the pure spectacle of it. It's a great movie, True Lies. And this one is pure spectacle, right? He gets what is it? So God, let me get this right. He, I think, appears in a plane at this point, and this rocket is stuck, and then he just fires it at a helicopter at this random guy, and he still has the wherewithal to say, "You're fired." And it's just it's like they're building this one line around this absolute brilliant spectacle. It would have been fine just to fire the rocket, but no, Arnie, you know, he's got to go that one extra, and it's because you get hyped by it so much just because of all the surroundings. And the goings on. There's a helicopter, there's a rocket, there's a plane, and he pulls up over an advertisement campaign or something like that, if I remember. And he just decides to go with "You're fired." I guess kind of you need those lines sometimes, because what would happen is if you didn't have that, he would just fire the rocket and an explosion would happen. You kind of need that kind of extra like punch it or like "You're fired" type of thing to kind of just really put a kind of oomph into it, you know. And he's brilliant at that.
One sec there. I'll just
It's hold on. Okay, I'll stop. So yeah, that was my second one-liner, True Lies. So what other one-liners you got for me?
Oh, I gotta go with Commando, and I could just pick the entire Commando script. But one of my favorites is obviously when he's got Sully hanging up by his leg, and he's about to drop him off a cliff, and he says, "Hey, Sully, remember when I said I'd kill you last?" "Oh, that's right, Matrix, you did." "I lied." and he drops him off the cliff. It's a great way to end a slimy kind of scene stealing character. Actually, Sully is like a great, you know, love to hate henchman, and Arnie just gets in an absolute zinger.
The main bad guy in that movie. We're talking about matches for Arnie earlier. You know, you've had the Devil, you had, you know, Predator, you know, you have in future, you have an updated Terminator in another movie, in fact. And in this, we have a henchman who like wears a stab vest, who was conceived in a time when Australia was in, shall we say. It's like the episode of The Simpsons, like when Australians always thought that America would have love for them, but unfortunately it was a very short-lived time. And it feels like the main bad guy in that movie is kind of born out of that. What you had a good way of describing him. What an overweight Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, he had a pot belly. I mean, it's funny because again, this is like one of Arnie's physical peak movies where he's just after doing Terminator before doing Predator, where he's obviously massive in all those movies and you know, still like hitting the gym big time. So like to put him up against a pot-bellied Freddie Mercury impressionist in chainmail, no less, He's extremely camp looking. I'm gonna kill you, Matrix. Oh!
Crikey, you've got some big muscles there. I should have went to the gym, I should.
I'll never wrestle a kangaroo like this. Yeah, I better stop there before we insult any Australian listeners. But yeah,
I
it was
don't
a complete.
give a fuck about that.
No, the Aussies are just as good as the Irish at taking the old ribbings. But anyway, yeah, like the fact that Commando had so many big villains, and even at one stage he had Bill Mack or whatever his name is, Bill Dukes, the Predator. I thought he would have been a good lead villain, but he got killed pretty early on. He's a big physical guy. So it's just a way of it's kind of how serious the movie itself is as well, which is to say not at all.
Yeah, it's kind of like lies through a one-liner. That's the ultimate. That really is kind of the ultimate kind of true lies. I kind of want someone to be like, this Arnie might bite me. Sorry, I just had to get that last one in. Yeah, so we're not classy on this show, people. But so my next pick is, and this is we've talked about it, Terminator 2. And it's interesting watching that again. It's actually one of the few movies where you can water down a character like the Terminator. If think about this, we were talking about Terminator 1 before. Imagine if we were like in our 20s when that movie came out, and then we hear about the pitch for Terminator 2, and it says Arnie gets teamed up with a kid, John Connor, and he's not able to kill, and he's kind of, he's not allowed to murder anyone later in the movie and stuff like that. On paper, that's horrible. And he is kind of toned down to an extent, and he is kind of a little bit more comedic, but it's still such a badass movie. Like, that's how you make it's probably a 15 or an 18, but it is kind of almost, well, I don't want to say family friendly, but it is kind of more, I don't know, it's hard to say because I'm immune to violence. It is kind of a bit more universal in its appeal, that movie. But there's one scene where John Connor is like, he's like, you're not supposed to kill anybody anymore, Arnie. And he's like, why not? I'm a cybernetic organism. I kill. And then he's like, no, you're not meant to kill anyone, Arnie, right? And then so you're like, for fuck's sake, if you're watching that at the time, you'd be like, for fuck's sake, man, he's not going to kill anyone. Then Arnie just goes into this place, and this security guard is like giving him lip, and you're like, oh, I can't do anything now. And just Arnie, without missing a beat, shoots him on the leg, and it's like, and John Connor is like, what the fuck, man? We said not kill anyone. And he's like, he'll live. And it's just a great way to kind of, realize that, okay, fair enough, he's not going to kill anyone, but the way that would compute as in a former killing machine would be, he would just shoot him, like, to take him out of the game, but not kill him. And it's a great way of kind of not undercutting that film and the seriousness of the Terminator. So it's a great line,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think the Terminator, like we mentioned about his, his one-liner clause, or the kind of the fact that he wants to market every movie with a one-liner. The Terminator's really switched it off. I think he said about, the I'll be back. It's just the way he delivered it. And apparently he had a conversation with Cameron saying that he should say, I will be back. But he said, no, we say it this way with the contraction, the I'll be back. And he's like, it doesn't sound so robotic. But Arnie was like, I just like it the way it sounds. So he won out that one. It's amazing. That's probably still his biggest liner,
Yeah.
Along with Hasta La Vista and a couple of others from the Terminators. But yeah.
Yeah, and he uses I'll be back in a lot of movies. And it's funny that if you can imagine him saying, I will be back, but it's kind of like, I'll be back is kind of, it's more urgent for a kind of killing machine, though, as well, if you think about it. He doesn't have time to say, I will be back. He say, I'll be back. He's kind of more rushing to, it's more like affirmative. It's more, I'm on a mission. So in a way, it kind of, really, I'm sure Arnie just didn't want to say the extra line, but the extra word, but it worked out well in the end,
Paid by the dollar.
Yeah,
definitely. Another one that I like actually is from Predator. It's just nice and simple. They're blowing up some huts and they're killing. I don't even know who they're killing. Some sign of like guerrillas or whatever. But
rebels.
Yeah, rebels maybe. And he throws like a spike or a spear at one guy and just pins him to the door. And he's like, "Stick around." And it's it's kind of, again, it's a fine line between terrible and brilliant, just the way it works, and like it's within the kill. I have to pinch myself not to use a Commando one again because it's like it's all too tempting. So yeah, that's Predator instead. I switched that up.
Yeah, the stick around with the knife. He throws the knife and then he impales him on it, isn't it? That's why.
That is the knife, yeah.
It's funny enough. I watched Predator again a few years ago, and like that movie holds up as like one of the best action movies of all time. I have to say, John McTiernan?
Yeah, director of
Yeah,
Die Hard as well. Yeah.
yeah, he was on a roll for a while, but yeah. So that is the one part of the movie that kind of is a bit more glaring of action movies from its era, where it's kind of the movie's just a great head to head, and that whole scene when he just throws it, it's kind of from a bygone era, was just so out of place. But at the same time, it's an Arnie movie. I loved it. I still love that line. It's fun to say, and when it happens, you kind of laugh, not in a kind of to make fun of way, but it's just more like it's almost like when a dad makes a bad pun or a bad joke. It's like, oh, there's Arnie again. Again, that kind of goes into the persona. Whereas if somebody else did that, like a John Claude or a Dolph Lundgren, you'd be like, God.
It wouldn't work. They'd just be trying to be Arnie. Yeah, the one-liner is a quintessential part of him. That's what I mean. That's why he, even before he did the straight-up comedy movies like Kindergarten Cop, Twins, Junior, whatever, he always had that kind of part to him anyway, where he's like, I want to make it a bit, humorous. And it was an easy sell then as well.
Yeah. So I won't use the Predator one. Well, I did, but have you got one other? Have you got one other one? Because I've got one other one I want to mention that's an honorable mention, but I don't know if you've got another one first.
No, you mentioned yours first, and then I'll have a runner-up or two, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. So mine is a movie that I never actually completed until very recently, a few years ago, and that is I've seen chunks of it all the time, but I've never watched it all the way through, and that's Total Recall. Brilliant movie. And there's a scene, obviously, Sharon Stone is kind of pretending to be his wife, and it's all these things are going on. I don't want to spoil it too much, but well, actually, I'm gonna have to actually, but you can stop listening for this bit if you want. But later on in the movie, he kind of has a head-to-head with Sharon Stone, who was masquerading as his wife earlier on, and then Arnie, never the one for sentiment, proceeds to like shoot her in the head without missing the beat. And then he has the great line, "Consider this a divorce." And it's just, that's one of those one-liners that, like, that's a really well-written one, that it's not a groan-inducing one. It's relevant to the plot. It's genuinely funny. And it kind of plays into the events of the whole movie. So it's kind of, the fact that she was masquerading as his wife in the first act, shooting her in the head and saying, "Consider this a divorce." It really, it's a one-liner that pays off, really,
Yeah, like you said, great film as well. Yeah, and it does. It's kind of part of the plot. Like it's got more logistical kind of storytelling to it than a lot of the Arnie one-liners, which is hard, I guess. Yeah, and again, runners up. I mean, yeah, I'm finding it very hard to look past Commando for some reason. Every second line I think about comes from Commando, but that's what you get when the whole script is one-liners, basically.
Yeah, he has some great ones. There's one that I think of that it's from the clone movie. I'm forgetting the name again. It's
the sixth day.
Yeah, I don't. It just came into my mind now. I actually don't have the exact quote, but it's when Arnie gets cloned, obviously, and he comes home and he sees this clone in his place and so on. But then he confronts the creator of the clone, and then he says, I can't remember the exact line, but it's brilliant when he goes, "You should clone yourself so you can go fuck yourself."
Yeah. Sometimes it's about the delivery, like of his as well.
Yeah.
It might not even be a one-liner; it's conception. It just comes out that way.
Yeah.
If you are me, then who the hell am I? Remember that when he's talking to him.
When I said go clone yourself, I didn't mean it. Go fuck yourself, literally. That's what he says in that movie as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're both big Arnie fans, and maybe we'll actually have a rewatch of some of those movies at some point, and maybe pick one or two of them and see if they do hold up, and we can do some more bad quotes, should I say? But many thanks for being on the show. We managed to do it in the end. Got anything to plug? Got any guests coming up on your show before we go?
Oh, let's see. No, I'm in contact with a few people through the next few months. Hope I have a few singers, musicians on. Never the most easy to schedule. It's kind of an ongoing process to get them, but hopefully soon. Yeah, definitely before the winter anyway. I'll have a few people on. I won't name names just in case they it all blows up in my face kind of thing. But let's see.
Yeah. You promise fucking some big star and you end up with
Yeah,
fucking Jedward.
yeah. That's it.
All right.
You never know.
All right. Anyway, that's it for us. I'll put a link to your show in the YouTube section, so all our listeners can check that out. All right. We'll talk to you again, and we'll be back later. See ya. Bye.
Oh, cheers.